Welcome everybody, good to be with you today. Not great to be with you today because it's the first day back from Christmas, but that's tougher than the first day of school. At least with the first day of school, you got new experiences to meet, new people to meet, and something to look forward to. First day back from Christmas is always rough, but welcome back. I want to introduce a term to you. Maybe you've heard it, but if not, that's okay. It's not one that is very commonplace in high school. The term is hermeneutics. Is anybody familiar with that? Again, it's okay. There's no expectation with you. So, hermeneutics is the method of interpretation. All sorts of things we encounter need to be interpreted. Everything we read needs to be interpreted. And I don't just mean, like translated, but interpreted as in, I want to say squaz for meaning, squaz being my past tense for squeeze. But, every event has to be interpreted. Our entire lives have to be interpreted. And hermeneutics is our method of interpretation. And when we use it in the singular, a hermeneutic, what we mean is it's like the lens we use to interpret things. I'll give you a couple examples to make this make sense. So, let's say this young lady here, she's been texting her boyfriend all day and he hasn't responded. Well, all she knows is what I've just said. I've been texting, he's not been responding. So in order to squeeze some meaning out of that, she's got to apply a lens to interpret the facts that she knows. Now, if she's already caught him cheating 4 times,
why are we going back?
Keeps taking him back, right? She needs serious as hell. That's going to catastrophically ruin her life. But she's already caught him cheating 4 times, right? So she's probably going to apply a hermeneutic of suspicion, a hermeneutic of mistrust to interpret the fact that he hasn't responded. And so the meaning she's going to take away is probably that, he's up to his old tricks again, he's cheating. Now, if it's not her boyfriend and it's her husband, and they've been married for 15 years, and they have 3 kids, and he's the kind of husband that, is still, hearts and flowers in love with his wife all these years later, and he's at every ball game for the kids, and they've got really a great marriage, she's probably not gonna apply the hermeneutic of suspicion. Right? She's probably gonna apply a hermeneutic of trust. Right? She's probably going to assume that his phone quit working. Right? If she's been traumatized, she might have a hermeneutic of paranoia, and she might assume he's dead. Right? From just the fact that my students assume I'm dead. If I'm less than 10 minutes early, my students assume I'm dead. I don't know who traumatized you. In legal matters in the United States, or any legal matters, but here in the United States, in legal controversies, in political controversies, much of them boil down to what hermeneutic one uses to interpret the Constitution. If we consider that the most important factor in interpreting the Constitution is asking, what did the founders of the country actually intend? That's called a constructivist perspective. We're going to interpret the Constitution one way. And if instead our hermeneutic is one that says the most important thing about the Constitution is that it is a living document that is amendable and that progresses and evolves, then we're going to interpret the Constitution very differently. And really the major political controversies in our country, most of them stem down to the choice between those 2 different hermeneutics. And neither is necessarily right or wrong because they're both intentionally built into the document itself. So Aristotle here is starting a marathon. Now, from the moment Aristotle starts the marathon to the, let me get the glare off of that. From the moment Aristotle starts the marathon till the moment Aristotle wins the marathon, there's continuity between these two moments, right? This moment flows naturally from the first moment. We don't suspect that there's been something out of the ordinary. We don't suspect that there's been an interruption. We don't suspect that there's been a rupture in the continuity. So this continuity all makes sense. Of course, if he'd come in last, there would still be continuity from the moment he starts to the moment he finishes. And what we call a hermeneutic of continuity, that I'll explain more in a couple minutes, is one of the two main ways to interpret the history of ideas and all the changes we've seen in society as we started in ancient Greece and we move on to Rome and then into the Christian Middle Ages and the Renaissance Baroque period, now into the modern period and on into our postmodern world. One way to interpret all those changes is to look for continuity. I'll say more about that in a minute. But if Aristotle starts running the race, from the moment Aristotle starts the race to the moment Aristotle is attacked by a gorilla with antlers with a chainsaw, there's not continuity. This is a break from what's been going on. This is a rupture of the normal outcome of things, right? When he starts that race, he could expect to win, he could expect to lose, he could expect to break his ankle. All of those are normal outcomes, standing in a flow, a continuity. This he didn't see coming. This is a rupture of the ordinary sequence of events. That's an alternative way to interpret the history of ideas and the transitions from one epic, one civilizational epic to epoch to another, is a hermeneutic of rupture. Let's get into those a little more deeply. So, a hermeneutic of continuity. I don't care so much about the monkey people, but from here on, the hermeneutic of continuity interprets all the changes as we move from one period to another as a natural flow. Now, in any human life and in any civilization, there's going to be both continuity and rupture. Right? So you're all living in a time of many transitions in your lives, right? Like 10 years ago, what were you in? 0th grade or 1st grade, right? And now you're a year or two from high school graduation, and most of you just a few years away from starting families, getting married, all those things. You're in a time of major transition. If there's nothing but continuity, well, then there's no life. I suppose if you're born in a coma and you stay that way, there's nothing but continuity in your life. So you need change, you need moments of rupture. But a hermeneutic of continuity says that it is more important to focus on the continuity. It's more important to focus on what remains the same or what is a natural outgrowth. Yeah, being in 11th grade is way different than being in 1st grade. But being in 11th grade is a natural outcome of what you started in 0th grade or 1st grade, so that you were engaged in the same life. Continuity is necessary to have any sort of sense of identity, right? That I'm not a different being than I was when I was in middle school or high school or in my 20s or my 30s. I've got a lot more, zzz in me than you guys do.
What's it like being in your hundreds?
It's not nice. It's not great. It's not great. I got one living grandfather who's going to turn 100. So I don't know his birthday, but his next birthday is 100. Applied to history of ideas, a hermeneutic of continuity looks at where we've been as natural precursors to where we are. And when changes occur, asks us to emphasize the continuity. Yes, the transition from the Roman Empire to the Christian Middle Ages, there's rupture there. That's a major change. But the hermeneutic of continuity would say, but hang on a second. The empire's embrace of Christianity is really, it naturally flows from what the Greeks were already doing in their philosophy. Because the Greek philosophers were already turning away from the mythical and amoral gods of mythology, and were already discussing questions of ethics and already discussing the possibility of there being a single omnipotent source of all being. And so the ancients were laying the foundation for what the medieval people were doing, despite the fact that major changes occurred. And then the explosions of the scholastic period and the Renaissance, the reawakening of society, the rediscovering of ancient learning, kicking science back into high gear, all of that can be seen by the hermeneutic of continuity to flow out of what people were already doing in the Middle Ages. And then the transitions we've yet to talk about and will in the next couple of weeks as we wrap up Intro to Philosophy can be seen as naturally flowing out of that. The advantage of a hermeneutic of continuity is that it allows us to connect with the people that came before us as our own. It allows us to value our cultural heritage and to value our traditions, even when we have in some ways moved beyond those traditions. A saying, and I'm sorry I can't remember who said it, and that's embarrassing, but is that if we can see, and I'm paraphrasing, if we can see further than the people that came before us, it's only possible because we stand on the shoulders of giants. Yes, this guy knows things that this guy could never have dreamed of. Right? But the hermeneutic of continuity says that this guy only is able to know those things because he is following in the footsteps. He is building on the foundations laid by this guy and this guy and this guy. And even the cavemen, and then even the pre-human. The alternative is the hermeneutic of rupture. A hermeneutic of rupture is one that emphasizes, again, there's always a play of continuity and rupture, or we would be stagnant. But a continuity of rupture wants to emphasize the rupture. So it wants to interpret the transitions of history as breaks, as rejections of what came before. What is the Renaissance? The Renaissance is a rejection of the barbaric and superstitious dumbness of the Dark Ages. What was the embrace of Christianity? It was a rejection of...
Miss Patty, if you're available, could you come down to the front office? Miss Patty, if you're available, come down to the front office.
It's a rejection, a renunciation of those vile heathen pagans that came before us. What is the emergence of George Washington? Well, what is the emergence of democracy and the Enlightenment? It is a rejection of the tyranny of nobility and monarchs? What is the explosion in science that brought us vaccinations and the moon landing and air conditioning, which I wish they'd turn up, or turn down. I want it to be colder in here. I'm sweating. What was that? It was a rejection of the idiot morons that thought that there was some magic good elf up in the sky granting their wishes. A continuity of rupture. The continuity of rupture has the difficulty, has the challenge that it makes us all imagine we're the first people ever to get it right. It puts us in a position where we feel like we have the moral authority to condemn our ancestors, condemn the people who came before us, and the arrogance to imagine. It costs nothing. It costs nothing to say, oh, if I was alive then I would have done things differently, right? If I was alive in the Middle Ages, I wouldn't have burned heretics at the stake. If I was alive in the 1700s, I wouldn't have participated in slavery because I'm so much better. Well, how did I get so much better? I've never burnt anybody at the stake, and I've never participated in slavery, so I am morally better in those regards. How did I get there? Because of all the work done by all the people that came before me to build a society in which I'm able to have not the accomplishment, but the dumb luck of having lived in a time where it's just in the air that burning people alive for religious differences or enslaving people is wrong. I didn't figure those things out. Those things were handed to me in a way they weren't handed to the people that came before us. Where it's going to become challenging, to embrace a hermeneutic of continuity is there will be moments, there will be movements, there will be philosophers we'll discuss in the next couple of weeks who understand their own work in terms of rupture. We're really, in the period we're talking about, we're entering for the first time in documented human history into a period where you have influential people who have contempt for their own heritage and have contempt for their own ancestors and who interpret their own work as a radical break from and a rejection of the things that came before them, who interpret themselves as liberators freeing us from the shackles of our traditions. And you'll see that when those figures arise, and I'm not saying that those figures are villains and irredeemable, but when those figures arise who are intentionally introducing not just change, but rupture on purpose, when those figures arise for us in the next couple of weeks, the results are going to be mixed. Everything has a light side and a shadow side. And the light side of some of those movements will be things we absolutely could not do without, like religious freedom and air conditioning and vaccinations. But the shadow sides to the continuity of rupture and to philosophers who are introducing rupture on purpose, the shadow sides are going to be the darkest shadows that humanity has ever experienced. The modern age is going to become an age of two opposing poles. Totalizing ideologies. We'll say a lot more about this in a few days, but a totalizing ideology is a set of ideas that you accept as as the explanation for everything, and to which you give total unquestioning commitment. And it's also going to be a period of the opposite of totalizing ideologies, and that's nihilism. The belief that nothing is good, nothing is true, nothing is beautiful, nothing is real. That's going to emerge as a result of the failure of all the totalizing ideologies. In the meantime, those two things, those two poles are going to emerge, as it were, floating on an ocean of blood. Floating in the blood of hundreds of millions who will be slaughtered in the name of some totalizing ideology that can explain everything, or in the name of there is no goodness, there is no truth, there is no beauty except for what I decide to make it. So there's a lot at stake for us in whether we embrace a hermeneutic of continuity or a hermeneutic of rupture. A hermeneutic of continuity is not like saying I want to go back in time. Everything is bad today. Everything was perfect in some mythical prior time. We know that's not true. A hermeneutic of continuity is being charitable and loving to our own ancestors, our own past, and our own heritage. So I wanted to take all this time to introduce these two terms to you, because as we discussed the last handful of philosophers that we're going to discuss during the intro to Phil part of the course, you know, I'm going to be referring to these two concepts quite a bit in making sense of what did these thinkers contribute to our world, and what did they take away from our world. So, continuity, rupture. We can shut down the video, but stay with me for a few minutes.